Submission has been misunderstood. When you hear the word submission, what comes to mind? Obedience? Silence? A wife having no voice? A husband making every decision? For many people, the word submission has become associated with control and domination. But is that actually what the Bible teaches? Because when we look carefully at Scripture, we discover something much deeper. Biblical submission is not about one spouse becoming superior while the other becomes inferior. It is about Christ-centered love, responsibility, sacrifice, respect, humility, and service. And here's the part many people miss. Before Paul tells wives to submit to their husbands, he tells believers to submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. That changes everything.
Submission begins with mutual love. Let's begin with Ephesians chapter 5. Verse 21 says, "Submit to one another out of reverence for Christ." Then Paul addresses wives and husbands. This is important because Christian marriage cannot be understood by taking one verse and ignoring the surrounding passage. Yes, Scripture tells wives to submit to their husbands, but husbands receive an equally serious and incredibly demanding command. Love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. Notice the standard. Paul doesn't tell the husband, make your wife obey you. He doesn't say, control your wife. He doesn't say, your opinion must always win. Instead, he points the husband toward Jesus Christ. Christ's leadership was demonstrated through sacrifice. He served, he suffered, he gave, he loved, he laid down his life. So biblical leadership is not a throne from which a man demands service. It is a cross from which a man learns to serve. Ephesians 5 ultimately describes marriage as a relationship in which the husband loves sacrificially and the wife responds with respect, while both live under the lordship of Christ. Submission does not mean control. Here's something every Christian couple needs to understand. Submission is not permission for control. A husband cannot use the Bible as a weapon to manipulate his wife. He cannot say, I'm the head, therefore you have no opinion. He cannot demand obedience while refusing accountability. He cannot justify intimidation, humiliation, threats, coercion, or abuse by calling it biblical leadership. Why? Because Scripture places the husband's leadership under the example of Christ. And how did Christ lead? Jesus himself said that worldly rulers lorded over people, but then he gave a completely different model. Not so with you. He taught that greatness is connected with becoming a servant, and he demonstrated that principle by giving his life. That means Christian leadership is fundamentally different from worldly domination. The world says, serve me. Jesus says, how can I serve you? That principle belongs inside a Christian marriage. Submission involves responsibility. Biblical marriage isn't simply about rights. It is about responsibility. The husband has a responsibility to love, protect, provide, nurture, encourage, and lead his family toward Christ. And the wife has the responsibility to respect, support, encourage, communicate honestly, and contribute her wisdom and strength to the marriage. This is why Ephesians 5:28 tells husbands to love their wives as their own bodies. And verse 29 says husbands should nourish and care for their wives, just as Christ cares for the church. Think about that. If a husband truly sees his wife as someone entrusted to his care, he won't use leadership to crush her. He will use leadership to protect the relationship. He will listen to her. He will value her perspective. He will consider her well-being. He will pray with her. He will admit when he is wrong. And he will be willing to sacrifice his preferences for the good of the family. That's responsibility. Submission requires sacrifice. True Christian submission is costly because love is costly. Jesus didn't love the church only when it was convenient. He gave himself. And Ephesians 5 uses Christ's sacrifice as the model for a husband's love. So imagine a husband who says, my wife must submit to me, but he refuses to sacrifice his comfort. He refuses to listen. He refuses to apologize. He refuses to change. He refuses to serve. He refuses to consider his wife's needs. That is not Christ-like leadership. A Christian husband should constantly ask, how can I love my wife more like Christ? And a Christian wife should ask, how can I honor God through the way I respect, encourage, and support my husband? Both questions require humility, both require sacrifice, and both require putting Christ above personal pride. Submission involves respect. Ephesians 5:33 gives a beautiful summary. The husband is called to love his wife, while the wife is called to respect her husband. Why does respect matter? Because marriage can be destroyed when love and respect disappear. A husband may feel deeply wounded when he constantly feels dishonored. A wife may feel deeply wounded when she constantly feels unloved or disregarded. Biblical marriage calls both spouses upward, and 1 Peter 3:7 gives husbands another serious instruction. Live with their wives considerately and treat them with honor, describing husband and wife as heirs together of God's gracious gift of life. Notice the language: honor, understanding, fellow heirs. This is not the language of domination. It is the language of dignity. Servant leadership is the heart of Christian headship. So what does servant leadership actually look like? It looks like a husband who doesn't merely say, I'm the head of this house. He demonstrates it by becoming the first to serve, first to apologize, first to pray, first to protect peace, first to accept responsibility, first to sacrifice, first to encourage, first to pursue God. That's leadership. Jesus said the person who wants to become great must become a servant. Therefore, if a man wants to lead his wife biblically, he must first learn how to serve her sacrificially. And this doesn't make the husband weak. It makes his leadership Christ-like. Likewise, a wife who practices biblical submission is not becoming voiceless or worthless. She is choosing to honor God's design for marriage while bringing her wisdom, gifts, strength, and partnership into the relationship. The final truth: submission is not inferiority. Let me leave you with this. Biblical submission does not mean inferiority. It does not mean losing your identity. It does not mean tolerating abuse. It does not mean surrendering your conscience. And it certainly does not mean one spouse gets unlimited power over the other. Instead, Christian marriage is meant to display something greater: love, respect, sacrifice, responsibility, humility, servant leadership. The husband is called to love like Christ. The wife is called to respect and submit in the Lord, and both are called to live under the authority of Jesus Christ. Colossians 3:18-19 gives the same pattern. Wives are instructed to submit appropriately in the Lord, while husbands are commanded to love their wives and not treat them harshly. So perhaps the better question isn't, who is in control? The better question is, who is becoming more like Christ? Because when a husband stops asking, how much authority do I have? And starts asking, how much can I love? And when a wife stops asking, how little do I have to give? And starts asking, how can I honor God and build my marriage? Something beautiful happens. The marriage stops becoming a battle for power and starts becoming a partnership of purpose. That is the heart of biblical submission. Not control, not domination, not fear, but Christ-centered love expressed through humility, sacrifice, respect, responsibility, and service. If this message blessed you, share it with a married couple, subscribe to Around the Globe, and let's build marriages that reflect the heart of Christ.